welcome to my channel. My name is Primrose. I am a 28-year-old PhD student enrolled with the University of Cape Town, and this channel is dedicated to discussing issues around academics, career and adulting. This month is solely dedicated to discussing issues around academics, and today's topic is on how to write an excellent essay. So personally for me, based on my experience as a student, my experience as a marker, my experience as a lecturer, as a tutor, as well as an editor, there are 5 key areas I think will determine whether you are writing an excellent paper or not. And the first one is this piece of writing critical? The second one, is it well researched? Thirdly, is it engaging in an academic manner? Fourthly, how is the presentation of this paper? And lastly, do you sense any originality? Does this appear to be the work of the writer? Does this appear to be a piece of work that is based on integrity? So I'm going to unpack those 5 key points. Please watch until the end. I really value people who do so, and I think that that's the best way to do justice to these videos. In as much as you are liking, commenting and subscribing, it would also be helpful for you to watch until the end and appreciate the time that I actually put into recording these videos. So number 1, what do we mean when we say that a paper has to be critical? So you're given an essay question, and when you look at it, you need to look at it broadly and also through your own lens. What does this mean? I have an example of a question which says, the African Union provides hope for the African continent. Do you agree? So already by being asked, do you agree? You're being asked to state your stance. And obviously you have your own opinion or perspectives on the African Union based on what you've studied, based on discussions you've heard, based on stuff you've read, based on stuff you've listened to, or videos that you've watched. And this shapes your mindset. So let's say, for example, myself, I think that the African Union does not provide hope for the continent. I have to have key points why. And if you've watched one of my videos when I speak about the African Union from the perspective of someone from Southern Africa, you will get more pointers on why I say this. That's a topic for discussion for another day, but it's an example of how you can discuss your standpoint. However, in so doing, you need to note what other writers, what other thinkers, and what other analysts have said. There are people that actually believe that, you know what, the African Union provides hope for the continent. And so in your discussion, you need to acknowledge such writings, such perspectives, and indicate why they say so. What you then have to do afterwards is to say, however, I disagree with these claims, I disagree with these contentions, I disagree with these perspectives, and then you move on to crushing those points that are raised by the people that are on the other side of the argument. So your paper, like I said, it has to be broad in the sense that you're aware of multiple debates in the area of study, aware of multiple debates that exist in relation to the essay question, and you're going to use both angles to substantiate your stance, to substantiate why you think the African Union does not provide hope for the continent. And you need to bring in examples. Okay, yes, you believe that the AU doesn't provide hope for the continent because they're struggling in the area of peace and security. Cite relevant cases of where you think their mediation efforts or their peacekeeping efforts failed. And then indicate what people who say provides hope say in terms of they were able to send peacekeeping missions to particular countries, they were able to mediate post-election conflicts in particular countries. But then after speaking about that, then find some things, some aspects of those peacekeeping missions or those mediation interventions that went wrong to justify why you are still saying that the AU still does not provide hope for the African continent. And then you don't just focus on one area. You could pick on more than just the peace and security aspect. The African Union exists for so many other reasons. So you could also pick on their struggles with economic integration. Maybe you then speak about others who speak about how the AU is providing hope through trying to fast-pace, a free continental trade area for the continent, but then I'll bring points to say that they've been struggling to come up with an African Economic Commission How is it that now we think that this simple strategy will work? So as you can see, it's a whole back and forth discussion, whole back and forth argument, but it incorporates points from all sides, and it incorporates key and relevant examples that are worth noting. And in so doing, you're showing that you're an expert who writes critically on the topic at hand. So number 2, how do you know if there is evidence of good research? Students need to go above and beyond the resources or sources provided. It is not enough to just stick to what has been provided in the course. So you're going to need to do a lot of personal research that is relevant to the topic. And sometimes if you're stuck, a starting point is to look at the reference list or bibliography of the articles that you already have, and maybe consider reading the articles that have been cited therein. So also, what you look out for in literature is not just summaries. You're not supposed to be summarizing readings. You need to look out for opinions, for examples and recommendations that are part of that literature, and pick on those. Then we can see that you were able to find relevant literature and also still find relevant points and examples from that relevant literature. And when I speak about going beyond the resources that have been provided, it's not about you finding a dictionary which provides alternative definitions of concepts and whatnot. Is the dictionary part of your area of discipline? So for example, for me, I always have a dictionary of diplomacy. It's way better than just citing the definition of veto power or the definition of sovereignty from a regular Oxford dictionary, for example, or from a Collins dictionary. But here I actually went out of my way to find a dictionary of diplomacy. Most of them are available online, downloadable PDF. Keep those, and it comes in handy for your particular essays. And you also need to look for literature or writing, for example, from think tanks or non-governmental organizations or from government departments, because they usually write reports and stuff that is up to date on particular issues. So for example, if you're writing on topics like the COVID-19 pandemic, it is not enough to just look at what is in the news, because there's a lot of YouTube videos, there's a lot of news articles online, there's a lot of news articles in print. But we can't just go with that. There's a lot of people blogging about it. But we have the World Health Organization. We have government departments, such as, the ones dedicated to non-communicable diseases. And we have reports by the United Nations, for example. So you need to tap into literature that is relevant and tap into work that is based on research, into work that is being done by experts, into work that is being done with people with first-hand information. For example, what is the government reporting on when it comes to the foreign policy of the country towards the new United States president? Then you need to follow parliamentary debates if the country has a parliamentary monitoring group, for example, South Africa has one, or to look at key statements that are being made, speeches that are available on the government departments' websites. Those are relevant sources to go to, and it shows that you've done your research. You've just gone beyond your course reader. You've gone beyond the discussions you've been having to actually be an intellectual who engages with the work of other thinkers, who engages with the work of experts. Number 3, your work needs to be engaging, and so you need to write in an academic tone. Some people get away with being a bit casual or speaking as if they were discussing this topic with their peers. But I think that can derail you, and you might fail to write something that is a cut above the rest because it seems like you're rambling. It seems like a stream of consciousness. So you need to make the effort to write academically. And how do you know how to write academically? You've got examples already, samples in front of you of essays. You can ask your course convener or lecturers how best they prefer you to write, and they can give you some samples or give you ideas and guidelines on how to do that. This is also where your tutors come in handy. Approach them, give them your assignment drafts so that they look at them and give you the go-ahead, tell you where you're writing too casually, tell you where you're a bit stiff and where you might need to be flexible and include your own voice. And as I was always told, from undergraduate through to masters, yes, you're writing this paper, but there's no need to be writing I, because ultimately everything you're writing here is informed by multiple authors. So rather refer to the writers or the authors, rather discuss this to say one would think this, one can conclude whatever, instead of saying I. However, if your discipline allows for personal reflection and the use of the first person, you are more than welcome to do so. I know we do that a lot in the gender studies department, but that doesn't also mean that every sentence comes with I, my opinion, and what have you. This is not a casual debate that is, you're having with your peers. You need to discuss in a manner that is academic. So read journal articles, see how they are written, so that you avoid not writing in a way that engages academic readers, supervisors, external examiners, and what have you. No flowery language. It can be nice to bring in sweeping statements, but make sure that they're all substantiated. You can't just start the essay, for example, by saying, the African continent is a hopeless continent, full stop. And so, what is this based on? So you might as well have a better written paper where you say the African Union currently undermines the ability of states to flourish in the global community because of their failures to contain peace and security, because of their failure to ensure good governance as well as democratic transitions in post-colonial states. Can you see the difference there? Both are sweeping statements, but the one qualifies the statement. It qualifies why you are saying it does not provide hope for the continent. So I hope I'm clear on what I mean by a paper that is engaging. Number 4 is on presentation. Universities differ, faculties differ, departments differ, lecturers or markers differ, supervisors differ. So make sure that when you're writing your work, it is based on the format that is required by your particular institution, department, or whatever is relevant. So usually any paper should always have a clear introduction, briefly discuss the key concept or the key institution that you're referring to, and then make sure that you give the reader pointers on what this paper will cover and what the central argument or the key points for the paper are. And we've already covered, I spoke about how a critical paper should be laid out. So we should know from the beginning that your perspective on the African Union is that it does not provide hope for Africa. And then you need to tell us that you're going to unpack this claim by looking at how it has struggled in the areas of peace and security, promoting economic integration, and ensuring good governance. Those statements need to be out there, clearly outlined in your introduction. And this also helps the reader to mark your paper based on what you say you are going to write. Because what usually happens is that if you just say this paper is going to discuss the debates around the African Union's utility and the African Union's provisions for hope for Africa, it's going to be difficult to follow. It's going to be difficult to try and figure out what your key points are throughout the paper. But if they've been provided in the introduction, it's more difficult to follow. And so also make sure that you also don't shoot yourself in the foot. You need to make sure that things you mention in the introduction actually come up in the body of your essay and you refer back to them in your conclusion. So now we speak about the main body. Main body just seeks, to now unpack what I said is your critical framework. You're speaking about what you're supporting, your stance, the other side of the argument, and then going back to say, noting all these points, all these perspectives, I still stick to my perspective because of points A, B, C. Make sure each paragraph, when it is read, it refers back to the essay question, because people tend to have like a chunk, just like writing on historical perspectives. Oh yeah, so the African Union emerged after the Organization of African Unity. The OAU was formed after colonialism or to promote decolonization. Okay, link those points, the decolonization, the shift from OAU to AU, to your main point, to discuss how, for example, at the beginning, the African Union provided hope because when the OAU was set up, it was for decolonization and we needed to be liberated from the European colonialists. And then we had the OAU that was created now to kickstart the projects for the African Union, for the African states to develop on their own, independent of their European colonial, or rather former colonial masters. And we see that they struggled, and thus there was now a renewal into the African Union in 2002. And then you speak about perspectives such as, the new Partnership for Africa's Development, that is NEPAD. So you're not only just discussing the historical, you're discussing the historical and linking it back to the key discussion to show ways in which this argument or this perspective that the AU provides hope or does not provide hope comes from. You see the difference between a very good essay, an excellent essay, and just an average paper, or a paper that goes off topic? I'm sure you do. And in your main body, also make sure that you're not just including stuff to stuff up, If you have a range, a word count range, if it's 3,000 to 3,500 and you're struggling, rather write the minimum, that 3,000. If you're a person who goes on and on about stuff, make sure that everything you're going on and on about is actually relevant and still relates back to the question. Writing is a matter of style, and it is also always based on continuous improvement. So you're not always going to nail it the first time. Check your feedback from your markers. Ask for feedback from your markers if you're not satisfied with the feedback that you already have. And then we have the conclusion. Usually people say this paper managed to do this, and that. Conclusion. However, if it's an essay, because it's not a thesis or a whole book or a whole research project, you are more than welcome to say there are other areas that can be looked at, which this paper could not exhaust because of time constraints or because of the limited research that you had. And sort of like just touch on those pointers to say, investigating other ways in which we can discuss perspectives on the African Union. We can look at debates around the proposal of a one organization of African states. For example, how the United States is a conglomeration of many states. There's also been proposals to say maybe we just needed to be a United States of Africa and have one leader, and not go in depth on it, but just to be like, those are other topics or other relevant perspectives that can be taken into account when we're talking about arguments for or against the AU providing hope for the continent. And so the final one, originality. Many of you have heard about plagiarism, or you've been at the receiving end of loss of marks due to plagiarism. Are you familiar with Turnitin or other, detectors which are going to be like, this paper is made up of mostly copy-pasted content, or they tried to copy-paste and edit but didn't do a great job of it? Don't be that student. Plagiarism is a highly punishable offense. You might get away with it, or you might have like average like a 20%, 40% plagiarism, but make sure you always try to have a plagiarism count of below 10%. And how do you do this? So you are taking examples from reports. There's a use of like a lot of statistics and whatnot. Make sure you use direct quotes sparingly. By sparingly, I mean that don't rely or over-rely on direct quotes. Only use direct quotes where you really can't change the statement. It's a popular phrase, it's the name of an organization, or it's a sentence that provides statistics that are relevant to a particular case study. Then you can't really play around with it. But even then, you can try and switch up the way in which you write such content. So paraphrasing is the preferred way of writing based on information from articles or from readings. And how you do this is that you read a sentence and translate it into how you would write it in your own way. This, of course, depends on your command of the English language to a large extent, but I feel like you have developed the skills to write summaries. So when you read a reading or when you find a quote, think of the best way in which you would summarize it. So then just write this in your own words and then put the reference at the end. It is much better that way. And also because you remember that you were writing your introduction using your own voice, you wrote some of your arguments using your own voice. The reader will be able to pick up your voice from your paraphrasing. They can tell when you've just copy-pasted and statements seem a bit far off from, the way you're writing in other sections. So then originality is lost. This seems more like a report of a report or a summary of a reading. And we pick it up when we're marking because there is a definite discrepancy between points from readings and points based on what the writer was thinking at a particular time. So it is about being smart in the ways in which you arrange points of readers, points of speakers you're quoting, as well as your own. Make it sound like your own work. Make it sound like your own work. I cannot overstate this. So that's it from me today. I hope that these tips have been very helpful. They are helpful for anyone in undergrad, postgraduate studies. I believe even experts in writing can also endorse these 5 tips. Being critical, well-researched, engaging, well presented, and having a sense of originality definitely sets your work apart from the rest. And then the obvious, answer the question. Don't create your own question out of the question. Never ever. The temptation is always there because you're a student. It also means you're smart. It also means you're crafty. But never create your own question out of an essay question. The only thing you should be creating out of an essay question is your own argument, and of course substantiated. Thank you very much. I am very grateful that you have watched until the end. Until next time, bye.